Welcome to the Can You Even podcast, a space where real life stories prove that no matter what life throws your way, you can. I'm your host, Candisse McCormick, and as someone living with spinal muscular atrophy, I've faced my own share of challenges, but I've learned that with the right mindset, anything is possible. On this podcast, I have the privilege of sharing stories from incredible people who have faced life's twists and turns, overcome challenges, and found their own version of you can. These conversations are all about finding strength, hope, and purpose, even in the hardest moments. So get comfy, turn up the volume, and get ready, because these stories might just shift your perspective in a way you never saw coming. Ta-da! I was like, please say this is going to work. With us being only the second podcast, sometimes I'm like, come on, technology, do not fail me now. So, welcome to the Can You Even podcast.
Thank
Second
you.
episode. Still doing it kind of messy and not really knowing what I'm doing, but it's working well. So, thanks for joining me. I'm very excited about this one because for those that are listening and might not know this, my guest today is Cobi Dion, and Cobi and I are cousins, and I think that her story, it was really funny because in your form you said you already know it, and I feel like I know like the gist of it, or like the very surface level of it, and so I was really excited to have you come on, because part of this podcast is all about sharing people's stories, and I want people to know that like no matter what your hard was or is, if you're in it right now, you can overcome it. And I want to make sure we touch levels on all things that can be hard. So yeah, I'm really excited to have you. So thanks for joining me.
Thanks for
Um,
having me.
I say that I think the best way to introduce people is to have them introduce themselves. So if you want to just give a little bit of introduction of who you are, what you do, all that fun stuff, and then we'll just dive in.
For sure. Yeah. My name is Cobi Dion. I do and am a lot of things. I am a mom. I have two kiddos. I am a wife. I have an amazing husband. I am the founder of Sonder Society Co., which is a company that hosts sober events in Calgary. And I also run like a small little mastermind inner circle online sobriety support group as well. And then I dabble in the real estate industry too with my husband. So that's who I am and what I do, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
So funny. I feel like you are like one of the busiest people I know with all the things that you got going on. I'm like, how do you sleep sometimes? But
Dude, imagine if I still drank. Like, whoa. Seriously.
you would probably be not very productive, to be honest.
I don't know how I did it, like looking back, because I was still really busy in those days, right? Like I was, for
Totally.
a long time I was like functioning. I don't
Totally.
know how. I don't know how. It's weird.
Yeah.
I know a lot of functioning drinkers right now, and I don't know. It's wild to me how they do it. But I mean, it is such a like progressive disease, right? So
Right.
I mean, eventually you just can't do it anymore.
Totally.
Yeah.
So on that note, I guess like we'll dive into your story a bit here. And so again, like I mentioned, we were cousins, and actually we were chatting yesterday, and we were talking about how like you thought maybe we all thought you were like weird and talking about you behind your back when you were in your drinking days. And I said to you, I'm like, no, I don't think any of us really thought much of it, to be honest. Like it was just like, okay, well, that happened, but not to this extent where like we ever thought you had a problem. I don't know if that's politically correct to say it was a problem, an issue.
It was a problem.
Yeah. So maybe tell me a little bit about that, because I feel like now, obviously, I know that you have had a problem and are living the sober life, but like, what did that look like, and how did you realize it?
I mean, I was never a good drinker from day one. It was just in my genes. Like, I take a
Mm.
sip of booze and I'm a nightmare. Like, I was known for it throughout high school. I always threw up. I always just couldn't handle my booze. And I mean, that should have been like a major red flag for me. But unfortunately, I was just like, yeah, party on. Like, whatever. I thought maybe like like I didn't weigh a lot, so maybe that was the problem. I couldn't, my body, I don't know. There I had
It's
excuses for
wild, like, when you really think about it, it's kind of wild, like, what excuses we all come up with, like, whether we're living a sober life or not. So, like, with me, I did my when I turned 40, I did a year sober just because
Mhm.
I don't like, I literally have no purpose as to why I did it, I just did it.
I love that
Um,
you did.
yeah, and we can chat about that more later because that was also an interesting experience. But then, like, this year, was saying, like, I think, like, since I was allowed to drink, I've had like 8 drinks all year, and like we're in December. So like it's interesting, but I remember like I would get like really hot and red and people would be like, "Oh, that's just normal." Or like, you
Mhm.
know what I mean? And like we make up all these excuses. Like,
I know.
why? Like maybe it is because they don't weigh enough. Maybe it's because of this. And it's
No, it's because it's literal bleeping poison that you're
totally.
drinking. Like, yeah, it's gonna do weird things to you because, and make you do weird things because it is poison.
And did you notice like those like reactions and whatever right from the very start? Like I feel like
No,
we not to say like we were like 12 years old and tanked all the time, but like
no,
we
but we
drank
definitely
early.
drank earlier. And it's funny because I had this conversation this morning with my husband, and he was
Mhm.
like, he made a comment about how Fisher, our son, is going to be like in grade 10 in a couple of years. And like, what were we doing in grade 10? Well, I know I was going to a party drinking every single weekend. I was blacking out. I was throwing up in people's yards and beds. And like, I even threw up in a purse one time. Like, but that's not the case anymore. Like I know my kids aren't going to be doing that in a couple of years, which is amazing.
So
But
good,
it's
yeah.
so good, but it is just wild. No, I don't think that I realized those things. I mean, I was young and drinking and I just wasn't thinking about anything really. I was just, I
Yeah,
don't know, I was into the boons and whatever. What I did notice though, I think was what it did to me mentally, as far as like an escape goes, like
okay.
the numbing, the, yeah, once I have this stuff, everything just kind of like goes away, and I don't know, life seems easier and more enjoyable when it's around. So I guess that kind of brings me to the next place that I got in my life. So I had like a pretty normal, I mean, I don't know, I think it's normal. I
I
think it's
probably do
really
too.
young being in High River and in a small
Yeah,
town, but it was normal. I had a normal, like I just, it was casual, it was like social, it was nothing crazy, right?
right.
And then, as you know, some bad things happened in my life, that I went through, and I didn't process those properly. I didn't heal from that, and I just didn't deal with it, which I think is really normal, especially when you're young. Like when
Mhm.
you're 19, 20 years old, you're not thinking when bad stuff happens, like, ooh, I should probably take care of this right now, or I might have an issue with it later. Like you just
Right.
don't think like that. You're not mature enough to understand. So I didn't, and then I just like continued on using alcohol to make me feel better when I wasn't feeling good. So I was working in the bar industry, right around when that stuff happened to me, and I just dove right into that because it was fun and it was an escape and it was a distraction, and I loved it.
Yeah.
I really loved it, but it was a lot of drinking, it was a lot of like socializing and things like that. And I think another thing that I really liked about that too is like I bounced around a lot to different venues and things like that. And you would, you go into these jobs and you meet new people and you're immediately best friends with them and like they're your whole world. But you go
Right.
into those things and brand new, these people don't know you. You can be whoever you want to be. So that's what I did. I went and
Mhm.
worked in the industry, and these people had no idea that my world had like literally just a few months ago, let's say, or, I continued to do it over the years, but burned to the ground. Like they had no
Mhm.
clue. I could be and do whoever I wanted to. So yes, yeah, so I was drinking quite a bit through my 20s, my early 20s, and then ended up meeting my now husband. And he was a big drinker too, so that just continued. And then I got pregnant, and that's when things slowed down for me drinking.
Right.
I didn't drink through. It was very easy for me to not drink through my pregnancies, and I mean, when you're a new mom, you're exhausted, so I wasn't into it anyways. And I had my kids back to back, so there was a good period where I didn't really drink much, or sorry, drink much at all. I
Right.
didn't. Um,
Yeah.
but then I don't know what happened. I can't pinpoint it still, and I've done a ton of work to trying to figure out like what was it that changed, I guess.
Okay.
And it was during COVID for sure. So maybe that's a bit of, I don't know. People went a little squirrely in COVID. That's definitely not why, but during that time, I started just all of these uncomfortable feelings and emotions and things started bubbling up for me just around things that I hadn't healed and worked on in the past. And I didn't like it. And I had this like busy life, right? And these two kids. And like I didn't want anyone to know or see that I was like starting to struggle with these feelings and mental health. And I didn't know what to do with them. So I just found that when I would consume alcohol, it would go away, and then I could carry on
Right.
with my life and nobody would notice, or you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I lived like that for a long time, and I think lots of people do. I think it's super normal. But then it just became a habit, you know?
Right.
And I would just keep doing it and doing it. And eventually, like alcohol is addictive,
Hmm.
you know? So it's no surprise that I started, depending on it, I guess.
Right. Do you like when you look back on things, like, do you feel like you have a bit of like an addictive personality? Like, do you get like when you find something that you like, good or bad, are you like are you all in? Do you become like kind
I
of
would
obsessed with
say
it?
I would say so. Yeah. I mean, like when
Yeah.
I did the fitness stuff, I was all in. Like if I
Yeah.
say I'm gonna do something, I do it. I love hard, and like, yeah, I'm pretty
Yeah.
intense. Yeah, I'm pretty
Yeah.
intense.
The reason I say that is because like
I have those
when you
years.
bring up COVID, I'm like, I feel like COVID for me was maybe like a bit of a shift, and partially what maybe made my brain start thinking about like not drinking or whatever, because I realized like I was a very social drinker.
Hmm.
So like when people were talking about like how it was like 3 o'clock, like already polished up on bottle of wine, I was like, oh, that's weird. I don't want to sit at home and drink by myself.
See,
And
and
so then
I
I
was the opposite.
right. And I
Mhm.
was like, oh, and then I heard about all like I agree with you. I think COVID brought out some of the best and some of the worst in all of us, and not being ready to accept that. But then you're also like stuck in the feelings, like whether it was you're stuck at home just because of COVID and you were dealing with those feelings, but then you have all this time on your hands to deal with everything else that
Your
you've
kids
maybe
at
been shoving
home.
down.
Yeah, you're like my work kind of shut down for a little while, and my kids were home, and that was extra stress, and you could drink whenever you wanted because you
Totally.
were literally doing nothing. So
Yeah. And you were
I
going
I
nowhere.
did, and then happy hour got earlier and earlier every day, and before I knew it, I was drinking a lot more than I wanted to be. And when I realized and recognized that and was like, all right, I need to pump the brakes here. Um, it was way harder than I thought it was gonna be.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So I know we've chatted about this a little bit before, and I think neither of us love the term like rock bottom. I think you get to choose your rock bottom, and it doesn't mean that you were like on the streets and
No.
whatever, but like it's different for everybody. Do you know, like, did you have a defining moment where you were like, holy shit, this is bad. Something
Yeah.
has to change?
Yeah, for sure. And it was later on. Like I lived like trying to stop for 3 years, trying to quit on my
Okay.
own. Like I'd get a little bit and then I'd fall back, and then I'd get a little bit and I'd fall back. But I always had excuses, like you said, like I never got a DUI, I never lost a job, I never lost friendships. Like nothing bad happened to me. You know what I mean? So
Mm,
but then I mean it did get to the point where there was problems around it in my marriage, and my
okay.
husband was really unhappy with it. and no, I don't blame them, and sick of my bullshit. Because at this point, I had been trying to quit drinking for, yeah, like 3 years. I had done treatment, I had done all kinds of stuff, and it was hard. It was really hard. So, yeah, that I guess would be like my turning point is like, okay, I could see that I was really starting to negatively impact other people's lives. And I didn't like that. I couldn't
Mm,
live with that. And so that was it for me. I was like, all right. Yeah. And I just surrendered to it,
okay.
basically. I was just done. I'm done.
Do
And
you
as it
think,
happens,
do you can totally be like, I don't want to answer this if you don't want to. Do you
mhm.
think that your kids noticed?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, for sure.
Hmm, interesting. Because
Yeah,
again,
for sure.
like, I think, like, again, I think as a society, we very much normalize the moments. Like, for me, it's not like I lived in your home, right? We would see each other, like, camping, where it was, like, normal for someone to have a runaway night kind of thing, right?
Mhm.
And so I think, like, I've always wondered, like, is it something where you were starting to notice that more people were noticing outside of your home?
I isolated, like really isolated at my worst times. But I
Mm,
still lived with my family.
yeah,
So like I know that my kids probably would notice, like I would get really agitated and frustrated and I'd have a short temper, but as soon as I had a glass of wine, then I
like,
would
fun
feel
mom
better
came
and feel
in.
okay. Like they had to have noticed that
Okay.
kind of thing, and they had to have seen my patterns and things like that and recognized, like, okay, well, she does this and then she has a drink and then she does this. Like,
Right.
I'm lucky, like it didn't get crazy out of hand, but it definitely impacted them for sure. And I still, to this day and forever, will hold a lot of guilt and shame around that. I'm still working on that.
Yeah,
It's hard. Yeah.
yeah.
I was not my best self.
Which I don't think I think that's kind of like an obvious statement because I feel like living your best self, you wouldn't be wanting to
Oh,
drink your problems and feelings and everything and
no. And
be
then
this
I
kind of
know
person.
once you're in this negative headspace, it's really easy just to spiral, and negativity, you know, creates more negativity, and
Mhm.
all of a sudden you just kind of stop caring about things. And I don't know,
Yeah.
I was just in a really dark spot, and I've learned to just, as much as I say I still I'm living with all of this guilt and shame and things like that, regret, and sometimes I dream about it and sometimes I feel it physically. Like if I think about specific things, my body will react to it physically. I will get a stomach ache literally and be like,
Mm,
but I have learned to sit with it and to feel
yeah,
it. And I've learned to give grace to that girl, and love that version of myself. It
yeah,
was necessary. It was
yeah,
messy, and, but it's okay
yeah.
now.
Um, I was gonna say, so you mentioned that you went into, like, treatment or rehab or whatever you wanna call it a few
Mhm,
times.
mhm.
I think for people listening, that has its own power and story within it, so can you share about, like, those times and maybe, like, what caused you to go back?
Yeah,
And
for sure. Um, Treatment has such a bad, like there's such a stereotype around treatment, and I was one of those people, who, when I heard about treatment, just immediately thought, like, oh my god, like that
mm,
place, no way, is not for me. I don't belong there. I'm going to be, stuck in rooms with people straight from jail or homeless people or whatever. It is not like that at all. So when I first went to treatment, um I I went scared shitless,
mm,
not kicking and screaming, like I went on my own. My
okay,
family was kind of like, you've tried all the things, it's not really working. Like maybe this is the next avenue for you. So I'm like, yeah, okay. And I wanted to quit. I knew I didn't want to drink anymore.
mhm,
So I went and very quickly learned that treatment is such a beautiful, beautiful place. It's full of so much love and support, and it actually really has nothing to do with drinking or drugs or whatever you're there for at
Mhm.
all. Like, you don't sit down and talk about it. It's more about like what caused you to cope with the things that you're coping to, like what's the root cause of it and how can we make that better so that
Right.
you're not wanting to go back to this unhealthy way of coping, right, and living. um, so anyways, the first time that I went into a 90-day program. Loved it, absolutely loved it. And so I'm glad I had that good experience, because not
Yeah.
everybody does. And I think that the first experience in treatment, like hopefully one's all you need. I
Mhm.
know lots of people that one and done, and that's great. I know lots of people who didn't even have to go to treatment and just were able
Right.
to on their own, and that's amazing too. But I feel bad for the ones that go one time and it's bad, because then they have that like tainted experience and they don't want to go back again.
Right.
And it's just, but so I got lucky in that sense.
Right.
And I got home from treatment, and I think I got 6 or 7 months of sobriety under my belt, and I had a slip then. And it was easy for me to go back to treatment because I knew it was great. I knew it worked. I knew that the reason I probably relapsed was because there was more work to do. There
Mhm.
was more healing to do, right? So I just went back. So I did it 2 more times.
Very, yeah. I
And I got
sometimes
different things out of it every time
I was
I
gonna
went,
say,
right? And I
yeah,
also met different people every time I went, and a lot, not a lot, but there are still key players in my life today from treatment. Like,
right.
amazing. Yeah.
It's interesting that you say that, like, you kinda had this, like, stereotype, let's call it, of, like, who went to treatment,
Hmm.
and I think that's very interesting. I don't recall, like, if it was your first time or your last time that you went. I think it was your last time. But when, like, we as your family, extended family found out, I remember I was like proud of you, but then I also was like, holy shit, I didn't realize it was that bad. Because to me, I think like to have to take that step to get that support that you get through treatment,
Hmm.
it was like bigger than I thought it was. And
Well,
so,
quitting drinking is hard. It's hard
well,
for people that don't use it as a coping mechanism. Like, I'll say to my husband, or like people, normal drinkers, right? Like, you freaking, they can't do it, man. It's
no.
hard.
And it's hard in so many weird ways. Like when I did my year of no drinking, the shit people say to you about like why you're not is so mean. Like, and
Hmm.
I'm like, why does me not having a drink affect you? Like, it
Hmm.
doesn't. And so I couldn't imagine, like, especially like in the social aspect, like, we live in a society where that's what you do. Like, I feel like, and I don't know, you can speak to this. Maybe you did relate to it, maybe you didn't. But I was like, I feel like people don't invite you to things once they know you're not drinking as much, or for a while, like, I feel like the first few months of it, I was like, I don't even know, like, what to do because, like, my social life was like, "Hey, do you wanna go grab drinks and a bite to eat?" Like,
Hmm.
that just was the norm, and then when I cut it, I was like, I don't know, I felt really, like, weird and uncertain, so, like, and that was my choice, like, I was choosing to not drink, so although you are choosing, you have a much more,
I
like,
was choosing, but I also had to stop. I mean, if I
exactly,
continued, I was headed for disaster, right? So,
yeah. Did
um,
you find that anything in like, I I don't know who's gonna listen to this. There's a little bit of me being holding back a little bit, but,
don't hold back.
we're just keeping it real over here, but I remember thinking to you how hard this was gonna be based off of our family,
Oh yeah.
and I literally remember thinking, "She's never gonna be able to come to something again," because we are a family that celebrates good times, bad times,
Hmm.
hard times, like, all the things with a drink,
I
and
think I
so
probably distanced myself a little bit in the first year, maybe.
yeah, and
Um,
I wouldn't say, like, bad,
no, and not
but it
fully.
was
Like,
just
you guys saw me, like, I came to
Yeah.
stuff, and honestly, like, it's bigger in my head than it is in yours. And I don't mean you personally, I mean
Yeah. In
the
most people.
world, you know, like I'm thinking, oh my God, what are they thinking? And they're judging me. But really they don't give two sweet books that I don't drink.
No.
They don't
No.
care. Like they care about themselves. Let's be
Yeah.
straight.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the first year I just had to be careful what I did. And I learned these things over time because I had tried to get sober so many freaking times. And those were probably things that made me fail in the past. Like I guess I would feel strong and then I would go do something like that and learn the hard way that maybe I'm
Mm,
not. Right? So this last bout, like this
right.
last go, yeah, I just had to really protect myself, set those boundaries, stick to them. Um,
And I think can we dive into those boundaries a little bit? Because I think, like, I remember when we first, like, heard your boundaries, and I was like, "You guys, that's not even hard for us to do." Like, I remember there was a few things, like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it was just, like, instead of us sitting there with, like, a beer in our hand, we'd put it in a cozy. Or
mhm,
if we were drinking, whatever, it wasn't just all sitting out,
mhm.
and those are the things. And then we just, like, didn't ask you if you wanted to drink because we knew you would just do what you wanna do.
Yeah, I think like the honestly, like the boundaries, they were more like personal boundaries, like things
Yeah,
that I promised myself I would do for
right.
myself. It's not up to you guys to cater to me, in my opinion. You know what I mean?
Okay,
It's
okay.
it's up to me to set myself up for success. So
Yeah,
like I'm gonna show up with a cooler of drinks everywhere I go so that I
mhm,
always have something on hand so that if somebody offers me something, I already have something in my hand. So it's easy for me to say, no, I'm good. I've got this. Because in the
right.
beginning, like those are all can be really awkward moments. Like, here,
Mhm,
do you want a glass of wine? Even though it's not really, it can be for the person with like the sign on their head that says like like straight out of treatment, right? Like
right.
it can be weird. So
'Cause
that and
did
like
you find, like, when you were kinda, like, fresh and even now maybe, do you still have the urge, like, if somebody was like, "Hey, do you want a glass of wine?" Do you wanna say yes, but you know you can't?
no, I absolutely do not.
Okay.
No, it's really strange. Like, and my husband and I have conversations like this all the time. Like, maybe it'll look different in 5 years, or maybe this, or maybe that. You know, there's a lot of like what ifs that I get asked. But I very truly and deeply never ever want to drink alcohol again in my life. I've learned so much about it in the last 5 years and what it actually does to your body and your mind that I have zero interest whatsoever in consuming it. So yeah, I'm lucky I don't have to deal with like cravings or things
Yeah,
like that or and my husband still drinks and I live my life now normally. Like I we just saw each other at our family Christmas party
yeah,
just a couple days ago and I go and I participate and I am not bothered whatsoever. If it was something that would bother me or trigger me, I would not be there. That's one of the boundaries that I have with myself too. Like I will not
okay,
put myself in a situation where I feel just threatened or triggered or anything like that. It's just a no. So I have to say no to a lot
right.
of things and all the time still
Yeah,
with friends and family and all sorts of things. But I just know when I have to say no and that's it.
yeah, fair enough. I feel like that's a life lesson we can all probably learn, whether it was
Yeah.
controlling
Well, and
alcohol
so
or
since
not.
I started doing that, I'm like, ooh, I kind of like this. Like, it's kind of badass. Like, I say,
Yeah,
no, I don't want to do shit. And it
yeah,
has started to trickle into all different areas of my life. Like, this last year, 2024, I really worked on saying no to everything in my life that I didn't want to do, not just, you know, anything that like sobriety related or anything
right.
in all different areas and it's pretty free it's pretty freeing on this
I
side like
it's a wild thing. I feel like I'm right there with you. I feel like I said no and quit it like, for a little while, I struggled where I was like, "I feel like I'm just quitting everything." But then I was like, "Why am I doing this if, like, it's not bringing me joy or happiness or, like, pushing me forward and, like, things?"
Mhm.
And so, um, I also think, like, that in a weird way, not that I was like some big drinker, but I think like not drinking just has that clearer mindset. And so you are able to like focus on your goals and really connect with them. So,
And a big part of my drinking too was I was a people pleaser.
mm,
It's like a major character defect that I carried with me through my
okay.
drinking. And so that was just another thing that, I mean, you focus on that a lot in treatment and
Mm,
therapy and stuff like that. And yeah, so I've learned that that's something that I needed to let go of. And so I've been working on that. But
yeah.
yeah.
Um, could you share like a couple things for anybody that's listening about like a couple of tips or tricks that maybe like you learned in treatment, or I feel like even that you've learned just going through this process on your own that you think would benefit them when they're in their
I think that if there's anyone out there that's questioning if they have a problem with alcohol, they probably have a problem with alcohol.
mm,
Um, it doesn't look the same for anyone. Um, and there is no, like we talked about this before, you get to choose your rock bottom.
mm,
It doesn't have to look like you living homeless downtown. It can look like it did for me, where you're just like, okay, I know this is too much and it's affecting me negatively, with mental health and stuff like that. And then you go to try and quit and you see it's hard and you go, okay, yeah, or it can look like look like what you did.
yeah,
You don't have to, it looks different for everyone. If you're questioning your relationship with alcohol, probably means that there's a problem in whatever form that is. It
right. What do
different.
you think if somebody, so like let's say they're at that point where they're like they're questioning it,
Mhm.
how do you think they could like what should their next step be if you could give them a tip? Because like you said, not everybody needs to go into treatment.
No, not at all. I mean, I would say if it's not like blatantly a problem is something, try something like what you did. Maybe I'm not going to do booze for a year and let's see what comes out of that. Like
Yeah.
what feelings are going to come up, what's going to bubble. Those triggers are showing you what you need to heal,
Mm,
right? If they don't struggle with going a year alcohol free, like then maybe it's not really that big of an issue, but you're going to learn a lot about yourself
you definitely do. Yeah.
by not drinking.
Mhm.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
There's
I
also
think
like the sobriety support group that I'm in right now is something,
yeah.
if you're questioning your relationship with alcohol and you just want to kind of talk about it, and um putting yourself in a space like that is a great idea. There's, it's not just for people who are sober, there's sober curious people in my groups. It's all different walks and talks and all of it. So
Yeah,
things like that.
let's dive into that a little bit. So, through your journey, you started Sonder Society Co.
Mhm.
Tell us like a little bit about that, and then we'll dive into like S Club and
Yeah,
some
so
of
I
the
mean,
other.
you mentioned it earlier yourself. When you stop drinking, you notice that you lose a lot of your social life.
Mhm.
And I noticed that majorly over the past 5 years of me not drinking. And I didn't love that, right? Like, obviously, didn't like that. So I'm like, what can I do about this? So, I mean, obviously, I had to wait until I got to a spot where I was healthy and strong
Mhm.
and all of that, and I could take on something like this. But I
I'm gonna
knew that I
interrupt you
wanted
for
to.
one sec.
Yeah.
I'm watching The Real Housewives of OC,
Mhm,
and there's this girl on there now that has like decided that sounded rude, Candice. She's like announced that she's an alcoholic
mhm,
and whatever, and she's like 10 months sober, and then she started bragging about how she's going to be a therapist for addiction, and I was like, whoa, girl. So that's really powerful that you said that. I think like no matter your reason for you to not drink anymore, I think really understanding your why behind it and whatnot before you go and help people is powerful. And that's why I think like your Saunders stuff is so important because it's not a program, but it has different people in it who have been through all different levels of sobriety. So,
mhm.
anyway, sorry, carry on. with what
No,
you were
that's
saying
fine.
about it, 'cause I just the fact you said, I was like, "That's wild." Because could you imagine being, like, coached or whatever you wanna call it, supported, and somebody's barely dealt with their own stuff yet?
Mhm, mhm. I
Yeah.
knew I wanted to do it, but it was just a matter of timing, and
Mm,
so I finally got to that point where the timing was divine, and I
yeah. Oh, I lost your sound. Can you hear me, Cobe? We're having technical difficulties. Hear you.
Oh, you couldn't hear me? Did I pop off?
No,
I'm sorry.
just, like,
Uh,
literally went silent.
oh, I'm sorry.
That's
Um,
okay, it's good.
yeah, I don't know what you
I
missed
don't
there.
know where it cut off either.
Okay. Well, basically, like the timing was right, like I was saying,
Yes.
and I just decided, okay, I'm gonna go for it. So, I knew that Calgary was lacking sober social activity.
Mhm.
I knew a lot of people, sober people I knew were lacking that, and I was just like, why don't I just do this, right? So we started with the events. We had, I don't know, 6 or 8 events or something last year, and they were all really awesome, and they were all
Mhm.
really different too. Like,
Totally.
yeah, I mean, there was some that were more like, I don't know, mental health related. There were some that were just fun, the thrift crawl that was just like shopping and
Yeah,
stuff like that. Like, because not everybody quit because they had to or whatever.
right.
So I have to have events for all types of people, right? Just the
Well, and
common.
sometimes you just wanna go, like, to something where you don't have to, like, maybe sit down and be like, "Hi, I'm Candace, and I'm an alcoholic."
I'll
You know
never.
what I mean? You just wanna go and find like-minded people.
Yeah, well, that's why I didn't really connect with AA because I
Right.
like going and saying, "Hi, I'm Kobe and I'm an alcoholic," because I truly don't believe I am. I had a problem with alcohol. I abused the shit out of it for a few
Mhm.
years, but I don't believe that I'm an alcoholic. That's not a title that I'm going to carry around.
Right.
And that's why I created S Club, was because when I was trying to quit, I mean, I thought my only option was AA. There's
Right.
not ton of communities out there for it. So, and yeah, so we're doing the events, and then I decided, well, I'm going to bring S Club in, and it's going to be this program, this community, this fellowship, this group that is not AA related, but kind of similar in the fact
Right.
that we get together and we, whatever, have the commonality of not drinking.
Right.
So that's when I started S Club. So S Club launched in July,
Mhm.
last July, and it's brilliant. It's an amazing community, and I just get so much joy out of it. I love it.
Yeah. So, a little bit about S Club. You guys, how frequently do you meet and where and how and all that?
So it's different with different groups. Like,
Okay.
yeah, so we meet bi-weekly.
Okay.
Yeah, so with one of our groups, we do a combination of online calls and in-person stuff because we
Yep.
can. Then I've got another group where that doesn't work because I've got some out-of-town people. So
Right.
we do solely online. So it just depends, on what, but yeah, it's a combination of in-person stuff and group stuff. And then I have a ton of guest speakers. I have accumulated like a lot of really cool sober people, influencers, different people over the
Yeah,
last 5 years. So I have, yeah, we have guest speakers, we do workshops. It's the ball.
that's cool. And
Hmm.
then basically the only requirement for S Club is that you are taking the steps to live sober or are already living sober, correct?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's people in that are 5 years sober. There's people in that aren't today yet, but really, really want to be. And, the support and the power in those groups are incredible. And it doesn't take long for those ones that want to be, are now. Like, I
Yeah,
just have one girl who hit 100 days just a few days ago. And like, it's just so cool to watch and be a part of those. Yeah, I freaking love it.
that's very cool. And,
So
like, what a cool thing to be part of with people, like, to help them take the step to make the decision and then hit all the milestones with them. Like 100 days is awesome. I do
Yeah.
feel like your first 100 days, again, me with someone, I wouldn't say that I had a problem or an issue with drinking, but that first like 3 months is like hard. You're trying to
Mhm.
figure out all the things. And so I do agree, like having somebody supporting, especially a group of people supporting that would be really impactful and powerful, no matter who you are. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah. So
Dog.
is there anything that you feel like we didn't cover that you want to make sure that we covered or that you shared?
I don't think so. Like, I mean, unless you have a question for me that you want to ask. Sorry, my dogs are barking out the window.
Okay, that's okay.
I think if there's anyone watching that might think they have a problem or whatever, or they don't know, or I don't know, I just want people to know, like, sorry, I'm gonna move.
It's
Um,
okay.
realizing and recognizing that you have an issue with alcohol doesn't mean that you're a bad person.
Totally.
I just want people to know that.
And I think you and I talk about this quite frequently. I think it truly is like a movement right now. I
Mhm.
think like you can pretty much go to any, I don't know if it's a bar because I don't know if I've been in an actual bar in a while, but like any restaurant or whatnot, and they have mocktails where like nobody's gonna know that you're not drinking. And so like there's a lot of different ways that you can adapt a sober lifestyle without being like, hey everybody, I'm sober. It doesn't need to be this big.
For sure.
Okay.
Even in my experience, and I'm only like, from when I started to now is like 5 or 6 years. But
Hmm.
the difference from when I first started 5 or 6 years ago to now is incredible. The world
Hmm.
is really adapting and changing and noticing that, yeah, there's a lot of people out there that don't consume alcohol
Yeah,
anymore. So, yeah, lots of really amazing mocktail lists out there. And yeah, yeah.
cool.
I think another thing quickly too is just
Yeah,
like, I mean, we know the holiday season is approaching
yes.
us. There is a lot of drinking and things like that happening out there right now. If there is anybody on here that is struggling that sees this, I mean, I guess the holidays will be over maybe when this airs.
Well, to be honest, I'm glad you brought that up because I honestly think that from like January or from like December until like March 17th, it's like the struggle is real in there because everything is surrounded by festive fes- festivities and events and all the things, and 99% of them are around drinking. And so I think like if you are like yeah, we are nearing this till the new year, but you the new year was hard. I started January 15th.
Yeah, that's
Um,
true.
and I was like still it was like people are still kind of celebrating a little bit of Christmas, like work parties and stuff. Then it was like Valentine's Day. Then it's like, all the things. And so I think no matter what time you're listening to this, what time of the year, if you're wanting to,
My chihuahuas are barking at something
there
outside.
must be something good outside
There's
right now.
probably a deer out there.
So, um, one more thing before we wrap up. Where can people find you? Can just people reach out to you at any time on any of your?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what I was going to say is just like if anyone is watching this whenever down the road, even if it's like, who knows, in 2 years or whatever, this podcast pops up in the
Mhm.
area, reach out to me. I'm always just a DM away to chat with anybody who is going through it. So they can reach me on Instagram. The handle is Sonder_Society_co. I'm sure you'll have it somewhere
Yeah.
linked to this. And then
Yeah.
I've got a website so they can find my email on there, but Instagram is probably the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, thanks for coming on and sharing.
Yeah.
Um, I, like I said, I am very proud of what you've done and overcame, and I think it's great that you're taking that and stepping into a world where you're sharing it and helping other people. Because, like I said, this whole podcast is about proving to people that no matter what your heart is, you can overcome it. And you're a very good example of that. And hopefully, many people will follow because they can do it too. So, thanks
Absolutely.
for joining. And I will chat with you soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, you will. Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Can You Even podcast. I hope you're walking away feeling inspired, empowered, and ready to tackle your own You Can moments. If you loved this episode, be sure to follow, rate, and review the show. It helps me reach more people who need a little extra You Can energy in their lives. And hey, if you have a story to share, I'd love to hear it. Head to itsmecandisse.com/podcast to apply to be a guest on the show. Until next time, remember, no matter what life throws your way, you can